Welcome back to Morning Joy, where truth matters. I'm your host, Keith Downey, and the big question is, do you have a plan or path forward as we head into the new year? Well, if not, you're in good luck here, because we got Debbie Georgianni and Bly talking about the importance of having a plan. Good morning, Debbie and Adam.
Good morning, Keith. That you're too kind with the words. So Merry Christmas to you. We're still in the octave of Christmas, and I hope those lights stay up and shine brightly. I love that. So keep your lights on for Christmas during this wonderful celebration. But Adam, we are talking about a plan, a path forward that sometimes people hesitate to make and to take because of certain situations. So let's kind of unpack this from the understanding in psychology that you have been trained in, Adam, and see if we can help folks to get ready for the new year.
Yeah, so it's really hard to change something in our lives is kind of the point. So let's have some fun with this. We'll go back to kind of a study that I did as part of a class in ecology a long time ago, and it leads up to the psychological kind of truism that we see in clinical psych. So imagine a tree in a yard, and there's a squirrel living in the tree, and it's fall, and he wants to get some nuts stored up for the fall, right?
Right.
And you know, there's a little dog that lives at the house who's sometimes in the yard, and you know, maybe there's a snake that sometimes is there. There's a few predators around. And the squirrel's thinking, okay, I need to store some nuts. So he comes down off the tree and he runs out and he looks around and he checks to see if there's any nuts within a few feet of the tree. Then he runs back and then he looks and he says, okay, is it safe? You know, I'm going to check for predators again. Then he runs out and scurries and he looks around. Then he runs back and he takes increasing risks to try to find these nuts. And he goes further and further out as the day goes on, you know, trying to balance between, I need to get resources, but I also need to be safe and not take too many risks. And that's kind of evolutionarily what the animal is trying to do, is maximize security and stability and minimize the risk. Okay? So we can all kind of picture that squirrel living in that tree. Now, imagine that for some reason, the squirrel gets the idea to maybe move into the tree in the next yard over. Why would he do that if he's finding nuts around this tree? You know, he's managing to find enough to survive. He kind of understands the dog that lives in this house. He knows what that snake looks like. Why would he take the risk to go to the tree in the next yard over? There might be a bigger dog or a Rottweiler that lives there. Maybe that tree doesn't drop any nuts, and he's going to get over there and there's no resources, and now he's going to starve. So why would he take that risk? He basically has enough resources to live and survive and stay reasonably safe, so he's reasonably successful and safe. Why take the risk of going into a new environment, a new place? And we see this in ecology when we look at animals in various types. There's always that balance between risk and stability. Okay. A truism that we see in psychology also, I have a master's in adult clinical psych, did all the training, all but dissertation, you know, for the doctorate. Years and years of experience working in therapy too, and clinical, different settings. So what we see, and it's interesting, is that human beings also don't truly change on a deep level in therapy, usually until their life blows apart and they have to put it back together. So,
okay, so time out for a second. So when they hit rock bottom, is that what you're saying?
Maybe not rock bottom, but basically when things fail, when things break down.
Okay.
So their current pattern, to use our analogy, the current tree that they're living in, and their pattern of trying to get resources and stability in life, and those could be emotional resources like relationships, you know, material resources, all of that. When that breaks down and they have to find another tree to live in, figuratively, from our analogy, that's the time that they put themselves back together in a different configuration. It's really hard to help a person change their life, truly change it, and interiorly change themselves if things are basically working. So we often say things like, oh, I should lose some weight and I should start exercising, you know, at least 3 times a week, and I should do this and this and this and this. But unless there's truly a motivation, it's really hard to do that. So think of the person that has a health scare in their 50s.
Oh,
right?
yeah. Yeah.
They're overweight. They haven't exercised for years. They're just getting by and moving along, and suddenly they have a minor heart attack, and the doctor says, if you don't start exercising, lose 20 pounds and start exercising, this is probably going to happen again, and you could die. And what do you see? The person suddenly, is on the treadmill
at the gym
every morning.
every day, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
6 months later, they've lost 25 pounds.
Right.
They're motivated because the pattern, the tree that they're living in, from our analogy, has failed. And the danger is real. And so now there's a motivation. Things have broken down. This current pattern that I'm living in no longer works.
Yeah.
I need security. And that means, in this case, I don't want to have another heart attack. Okay. So this is kind of the foundation of why it's so hard for us to personally change in life. It's easy to say intellectually, I should do X, Y, and Z, but the bottom line is my bills are basically being paid. I'm getting enough food. Things are good enough and stable. Why would I take the risk of changing something? There's kind of an evolutionary, built-in, biological, very core imperative to say, okay, things are working well enough. Why risk changing
Leave it as
something?
Is. Right. Well, let me. Okay, can I interrupt you for a second? What? Answer me this question. So, in families, because we're mainly focusing on families today on Morning Joy. Have you seen this a lot? Because we've seen it in coaching, where the family will be very, very dysfunctional, but people are comfortable in that arena because they can predict it. They can predict the outcome, and they're safe enough and secure enough in that family that they're unwilling to make changes. Have you seen that?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So this is the same in an individual's life. They'll do something dysfunctional that isn't the best for them, but they understand it. And so they do it because they know how to navigate it, even though it's not good for them. Same thing in family dynamics. So I'm a canon lawyer, like professionally, as part of my work week. I go to exorcisms every Friday and do all of that work and all the intakes and quarterback that stuff. But the bulk of my week in terms of hours is working as a canon lawyer. So I'm a judge in our tribunal. I professionally study failed marriages.
Wow.
Every day.
Wow.
I've studied hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of studying the story in detail from the two people's childhoods and the patterns established in their childhood up through their life, meeting this person, how the relationship started, how it went, and then how it failed. And so you see what you're talking about exactly play out over and over and over and over. And the bottom line is we live out the patterns that we saw our parents do when we were children. And we try to recreate the family that we grew up in, whether we realize it or not. That's the critical piece. You might say, oh, it was awful. Why would I do that? But how many people say, oh, I've become my father. I've become my mother.
Yes.
I'm living in the same dysfunctional thing. How on earth did I do this? I swore this is the last thing I would do. Because we do it unconsciously. And that's the next piece that's critical to understand. We unconsciously continue to do the same patterns that we know. Not the ones that we think are best for us, but the ones that we know. So if all we know is dysfunction, we will find somebody to play out the same dysfunction with that we grew up with unconsciously, and we'll end up recreating our parents' marriage, even if it was broken and it failed. Now, the same thing in life. If I'm just as an individual, what we're talking about here, I'm more or less getting by. I have enough stability to survive. It's not really functional. Maybe I've got a gambling problem. Maybe I've got a drinking problem. I've got some, handicap in my life that's really limiting my success. But I'm more or less getting by. It's really hard to change that because I've learned whatever those patterns are, I've learned them earlier in life. And basically I've learned this is how you navigate life. This is how you survive. And I play it out. And even though it's only, a 20% success rate, I can limp by and do what my dad did or my mother did or, whoever influenced me growing up. And it's really hard to change that. So what's the key? Well, what we're getting at here is we need to bring all this unconscious, repeating old patterns into the conscious mind. Instead of it being kind of something behind you that you can't see that affects you and kind of controls your life without you realizing how. You say, why do I do the same relationship over and over? I've done this 3 times. How on earth do I find these people? And I just keep repeating it. That's an unconscious process. We need to bring it into the conscious mind, into the rational mind, so that we can see what we're doing honestly. And now we have the opportunity to possibly change it. Okay. And that's the idea of going from that tree that is maybe not the best tree to live in for the squirrel, but taking the risk of going to another tree. And that's where the plan comes in. If we're going to make a rational, conscious choice to change something in life, we need a concrete, short, medium, and long-term plan so that we can really apply our will and take steps to get there, because it's going to be very hard to do it. Because the biological imperative is get by and stay safe. And if all I know is this dysfunctional pattern, it's scary to do something functional because it's new and different.
It's unknown, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so for all of us listening to Morning Joy, basic first steps, we have to get real with ourselves, right? And what we were brought up in, how we were conditioned, what we saw, how we were trained, and bring that, like you said, into the conscious level, correct? So we're not going to try to say, oh, that was in the past, that's when I was a kid. You're not trying to trigger yourself or re-traumatize yourself or anything, but just to be real that there were these main dysfunctions that were happening, or things that weren't right, and you have to just bring those into I guess your mind in order to deal with them, because a lot of people have pushed this down deep into their being because they don't want to deal with it. So let's hold it there for a minute. These are interesting aspects. I just want to make sure we grasp it, and let's send it back to Keith. He'll send it back to us. But I've got a few more questions for you, Adam, before we get into the plan. So let's hold it there and send it to Keith for some Morning Joy updates.
Alrighty, thank you so much, Debbie and Adam. And we're talking about having a plan here, and I'm looking at the wind chill / heat index for the country on January 10th, and it is going to be incredibly cold apparently. So maybe plan according for that as well. I also see a lot of negative temperatures, and one in particular that I saw that kind of made me chuckle. In eastern Pennsylvania, there's an area where it's shown as -0. I'm not even sure how that's possible, but I guess that's really cold. Is that what when these people say, oh, it's a dry heat, is that what people say when it's dry cold? I don't know. But coming up next, we're going to continue this conversation of having a plan, getting to know this plan with Debbie Georgianni and Adam Bly. So stay tuned. We'll be right back on Morning Joy, where truth matters.
You're listening to Morning Joy, where truth matters.
Welcome back to Morning Joy, where truth matters. I'm your host, Keith Downey, and on the final edition of today's The Next Right Thing, we're continuing the conversation on having a plan forward with Debbie Georgianni and Adam Bly. Take it away, Debbie and Adam.
Thank you so much, Keith. This is really good information, Adam. So let me just, for the practical steps for all of us, you know where I'm going with this. Most people, when they go back into their childhood and look at how their families played out growing up, if they're really going to go into some of these circumstances and go into the past, they go under the direction of somebody who's trained in therapy, right, or counseling, or a psychiatrist or something, because you don't want to trigger that person or re-traumatize that person. So what would you say practically is give us some of the best initial steps for us to get real with what really transpired when we were younger?
Well, you know, what you're saying is true, Deb. To really get into this deeply, you really need, I think, especially if there was a lot of trouble, you need some professional help to do that. You need a guide to help you through that process, and that's kind of why therapy is there, counseling is there. I'm using this analogy more for understanding. So not necessarily for the person that has trauma and a lot of dysfunction, but to understand why we are resistant to change by nature. And that even if something isn't terribly healthy, as long as it's working enough, we are resistant to changing it. It's just so that we understand that this has to become a conscious process. We can't vaguely say, oh, I should change that and I'll figure out, it'll just happen because I want it to, and somehow I'll do that this year.
Right.
That's almost never going to work because we are up against a resistance of our basic biological nature, which is don't change things unless you have to, because it may not be working. It may be worse if we go to the tree next door, to use our analogy from the first segment. If I change my environment, maybe it'll be worse than what I'm in now, so the imperative is stay here. And that's an unconscious imperative. And when there's dysfunction, what I'm saying is there just so we understand it, even then we tend to repeat the same dysfunction over and over again because it's what we know. We don't understand what healthy feels like, whether it's spiritual or family or even with ourselves. We understand what we've experienced, and so we tend to repeat that. So,
and healthy can feel uncomfortable.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
It can be terrifying if we've never experienced healthy. We have no idea how to navigate it.
Right.
And so it's scary. And so we tend to want to repeat the same old dysfunctional patterns. Like think of the person that, I don't know, relies on some crutch in life to deal with their pain or problems. And they just turn to that to solve life and get by. So maybe the person picks up drinking early in life, and that's their solution when they feel discomfort. Well, if you always rely on that crutch, pretty soon that's your solution to life, and that's your default place to go when you feel discomfort or things aren't working. Mm-hmm. And if you repeat that habit enough, that becomes what seems like your only option. So to make all this conscious, it helps a lot to have that concrete plan. Because if we don't just vaguely say, well, I should get to Mass more this year, I should maybe start praying a little bit, and, maybe I'll get real with myself about, my sins and get to confession, and make it concrete, it really helps. Because then we're kind of cornering ourselves in terms of managing ourselves and saying, well, look, I said I'm going to do this, and this is a concrete thing. I said I'm going to make it to Mass at least 4 times this month. I'm going to try to make those Sundays this month, and that's my goal, and that's a concrete goal, versus vaguely saying I need to make it to Mass more. It's easier when things are concrete, and the short, medium, and long-term plans are critical. So you don't want to say by the end of the year I'll be making it to Mass regularly and I'll get my spiritual life in order. That's very vague, and the goalpost is so far down that we don't really do anything to approach it. We have no idea how to approach that, and we don't even understand the goal that we're envisioning. But if I have a concrete goal, I say by the end of this month I'm going to make it to Mass 4 times, and I'm really going to listen to the gospel this month, meaning I'm going to read it before Mass starts. I'm going to get there 10 minutes early. I'm going to open the book, and I'm going to read the readings for that day and reflect on them, and then I'm really going to listen when Father gives his homily. That's concrete. And then a medium plan. By the end of 6 months, I want to be at this point in my spiritual exercises, and by the end of the year, this point. And that really helps us bring it into the conscious mind and start bringing it into real life.
Right. And so you can do that with any part of your life, the spiritual side, like as you're talking about your physical health, right? And what you do for your mind to stimulate your mind, right? And then you could do that same baby step plan for your family. So as we're talking families today, Monsignor Pope was going to be talking about that. So you can bring this plan in, and you can make it. You can bring it forth to people around you in a slow, measurable way. Correct, especially in the family.
Yeah. So of course, this idea we're talking about where we're resistant to change in all the areas of life. The same thing with the family dynamic. A family is a complex kind of pattern or structure or group of people that have figured out a way to navigate interacting with each other. They're all playing different roles with different people, and they're negotiating, whether it's conscious or unconscious, their needs and wants, and it's a delicate structure. And so if you try to radically change within that structure, people will be confused and sometimes react negatively because it's like, where's this coming from? This isn't you.
It doesn't
this
feel
is so
right.
strange.
Yeah.
Why
who
have
is
you
this
changed so
person?
much?
Yeah.
Who is this person? Because basically they're saying, like, you're breaking the social contract. We had an unspoken agreement that we're all going to get by playing these roles, and we've all just lived through that over the holiday break. Most of us have experienced, here's these old patterns that repeat when I get together with family over the holidays, and I don't know why. It's always the same. It's always we can't get too deep in conversation with so and so, or whatever it might be, failing to encounter this person in a genuine, healthy way because we just keep reenacting my childhood and how we interacted then. We all experience that, and it's a little frustrating. So here's the beautiful thing as we're getting towards the end. When it comes to the spiritual arena in life, the church gives us really good guidance in the form of, here's a pattern of life and a pattern of spiritual exercises that has worked for millions of people and has been figured out by the church over centuries of experience. Here's what the average person can manage to do in their life, okay, the average lay person. Here's the amount of spiritual exercises and time and energy it takes to basically keep yourself squared away spiritually, emotionally, psychologically, right? Mm-hmm. And here's some things that, if you want to go deeper, that have worked for millions of people over centuries. And here's the very deep stuff, like the professed religious and the cloistered people. The church has patterns and exercises
and habits
that are tried and true, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You don't have to be scared and say, I'm going to come up with something new and I don't know if it'll work.
Right. So the church has got it right again. I love the whole Holy Mother Church. Okay, Adam, this is really good information for us, especially getting ready to start the new year. But unfortunately, we are running out of time. So a couple things. We're going to send it back to Keith and then to make room for Mondays with Monsignor Charles Pope, which we're excited to have him every Monday. And he's going to be talking about the family today. And then we're going to step aside. But Adam, we are guests on the After Show Clubhouse, so we can talk more about this. And this is your first time in the Clubhouse, so I hope our listeners jump over to social media. But thank you, Adam. I'll see you in a little bit, and we'll send it back to Keith for the rest of Morning Joy.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Debbie and Adam. And if you missed this last Saturday's episode of The Spirit World, highly recommend looking back at it, because Debbie and Adam unveiled their New Year Boot Camp Challenge. So as you're making your goals and plans for this New Year's, they want to also make sure you prioritize your spiritual health. Their boot camp challenge it's really going to help you make 2025 your best year yet. And as I mentioned, you can find it on the archives on YouTube or Facebook, or even where you listen to podcasts. Just search The Spirit World and begin again in Christ. But coming up next, yesterday was the Feast of the Holy Family, and with holidays still upon us, it's a great time to reflect on family. So we'll be right back on Mondays with Monsignor Pope on Morning Joy, where truth matters.
You're listening to Morning Joy, where truth matters.